Howdy. Y'all aren't learning anything. Howdy. It's a little better. We're going to try this once again. I know we got a couple of old ags that are back. Howdy. All right, getting a little better. By tomorrow at the award ceremony, I expect y'all to be on cue with that. You never have to say howdy again after you leave Aggie Land until the next time you come back, but I do need you to get with the program. Now it's time for us to gear up for the keynote and panel. I would appreciate it if you'd wrap up or postpone your conversations and come have a seat. We'll get started here in 2 or 3 minutes. Howdy. Getting better, getting better. So I know some of you have been here for a while, but I do want to say a welcome. As you notice, we added some more seats. Things sort of expand as the program builds momentum. And we're transitioning now from a portion of the program that was just for competitors and prize sponsors into one that is more about education and hearing from some really cool folks. So if I haven't met you yet, my name's Chris Scotti. I'm the chair of the competition, been involved in this for all 10 years that it's been around. And I've actually been on your side of the table before too, as an entrepreneur, starting and building a company and figuring out how in the heck I'm gonna make payroll in the next week. So look, I've been in your seat before too. So we'll do a much bigger intro and kind of review how the competition and how we got here, and say thank you to folks. But I do want to really quickly say thank you to the prize sponsors that were part of the last facilitated networking. How did that go? I mean, I know it was kind of chaos, but did you have some good conversations, competitors? Yeah? All right, can we give our prize sponsors a really big hand real quick? For those just joining us, we had this facilitated networking, or speed dating, as we've called it over the years, that quickly introduces prize sponsors to the competitors. One of the unique things about TNVC is that we allow our prize sponsors to pick the winner of their prize. And that's a little different from some competitions that force a major sponsor to give their award to that first, second, third place winner. A lot of times those deals don't end up getting done after the competition. So we would rather make sure that law firm that has some specialty, or that investor that invests in a certain type of company, gets married up to a startup that actually needs that work. So this wouldn't be possible without those sponsors, and just want to say thank you once again. You'll hear a little more about those sponsors and what they do and how they chose their winner tomorrow during the award ceremony. So just real quickly, kind of where we're at. We just wrapped up the facilitated networking. Now we're going to go into a keynote where we're going to hear from a really cool person that I'll introduce in a second, that we want to set the tone for the event. And then we will be doing a panel that we call Entrepreneurial Perspectives. And this was something that one of the panelists just reminded me was actually born in 2019, because he didn't get to hear it when he won. So we're going to hear from those panelists and some of the great milestones that their company has reached since they sat in the seats that many of you competitors are in now. So in this audience, and part of the reason it grew, both here in person and online, is that we also invite researchers, whether those are graduate researchers or faculty researchers, to join and watch this. The reason that we do that is because that's the future innovators. That's the future folks that are going to be sitting in your seats, or going to be part of your teams in the companies that get started up around technologies emerging from institutions like Texas A&M and the many other great institutions we have in Texas. After the keynote and panel, that's when we're going to have a little fun section. We're going to all go up to the rooftop bar, 11th floor, and we're going to have a little networking reception that's hosted by the Brazos Valley Economic Development Center, who is also a prize sponsor, and the office that I work for, Texas A&M Innovation. Hope you'll join us for that. That goes up until 7, as I told a few of you. That's when we stop paying at the bar. If you want to hang out, that's fine. Competitors, I'll warn you, you got an early day tomorrow. All right, so I know you've heard it harped on a few times. I'm going to do it again, and it's really important now. Download the app and get it ready. I actually would recommend you do that now, and make sure your app is working and you're logged in. If it's not, if you're having trouble, you can raise your hand or step to the back of the room, and one of our staff back here at the table will help you get it set up. That's how you submit questions to the Q&A during the panel today, and you vote on the questions that are already in there. You need to have that ready by then. And it's also, you need that ready for tomorrow's elevator pitch voting, because that's how you select a winner. So without further ado, I want to introduce our keynote speaker. So Michael and I met kind of an interesting way. I got last minute asked by my boss, Pete O'Neill, will you go pick up this guy at the airport and make sure he gets to our office okay? I was like, okay, I could do that. I helped friends, drove for Uber for a little while, a long time ago. So I went and picked Michael up, and I had one of the neatest conversations in the car with him. This guy started out as an Olympian, ended up as a CEO of a very large company. I'm not going to steal all his thunder on that, but I'm going to tell you that I got excited about that conversation. And I hope just that 10 minutes that we were in the car together, now he's going to get to spend 20 or 30 minutes with you. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about his journey and how how we can learn from that experience and that journey and help us to be successful in everything that we do. We always ask a unique keynote speaker to come and talk to the group. I think this year we've got a really unique one. And I just want to say a huge thank you and welcoming Michael Wilson to the stage.
You bet. You hear me okay? Is that too loud? All right, thank you. What an honor and privilege it is to be here to just share some things in my life and some things in other folks' lives that we all spent time together, whether it be an athlete or in business. But everyone in this room has some very unique DNA to you, but we also all have very similar DNA characteristics. And so I'm going to get to share a little bit with my gymnastics world, kind of share how there was a bridge that went from athletics over into the business world. But before we do that, I want to ask a few questions. How many of you all have done gymnastics? It could be a forward roll in the first class. Raise your hand and raise it high. Wow. That's probably 40%, 35, 40%. That's impressive. And there were some guys in here. I'm even more encouraged about that. Who competed on a gymnastics team in a competition? Raise your hand. Love it. That's great. So you can probably name the 4 events that women have in gymnastics, right?
In 1967, we had forex, bars, unevens and bars were kind of, you consider those the same event?
Uneven bars, yes.
Uneven bars, forex, beam, and then we had trampoline.
Okay.
Before they ditched it.
And then all around they had floor exercise and vaulting, uneven parallel bars. And then trampoline was an additional event. Well, this past weekend, I happened to be with someone that you probably know from the past, and probably a lot of you have heard this name, Julianne McNamara. So she won the gold medal in 1984 in the Olympics. I happened to sit on the International Gymnastics Hall of Fame board with Nadia Comaneci and Bart Connor. We all got to bring Julianne McNamara onto the Hall of Fame. And what an amazing life she's had, not only as a gymnast, but as a mother and after. We also inducted Carly Patterson from Dallas, Texas, who in 2004 won the women's all-around gold. So it's a very unique sport. Can someone name the 6 men's events? High bar. Pommel horse and you got it. So men have 6 events, the women have 4 events. And back in the day when I competed in gymnastics, you could not compete internationally if you specialized in 1, 2, or 3 events. You had to do all 6. So for me, at the age of 11, when I started into the sport of gymnastics, my sister was doing it out in the backyard. She was doing back handsprings. She was a year younger than me. We were very competitive, you can imagine, siblings. And I'm going, I can do that. Well, after busting my head a few times, I couldn't do that. So I went into the gym with her. A few weeks later, my parents came in with us. They put me on a trampoline, and they taught me a front flip and a back flip within 10 minutes. And they're going, as little as you are, and I was the littlest in my class by a head, I still am, you could be a really good gymnast. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, you ought to come try out for the team. The next week I came in, I tried out for the team. I made the team. Well, there was only 6 people on the team, 6 boys on the team. So it was pretty easy to make the team. But between the time I was 11 and 13, I fell in love with gymnastics. I played football, baseball, basketball, obviously second, third string, as short as I was. But gymnastics captured my heart. When I hit 14, I started entering into national competitions. I'd only been in the sport a little less than 3 years, and I was competing in national events, not doing very well, coming in 26th and 30th and whatever. But what happened between 14 and 17 is I had a coach that believed in me. He mentored me, he coached me. He brought a second coach to the table, an assistant coach, mentored me, believed in me. But I have to tell you, between the time of 14 and 17, as I fell deeper in love with the sport and created a pattern of discipline every single day, 6 days a week in a gym, 3 to 3.5 hours every day, 51 weeks out of the year. That 1 week was shared between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and 4th of July. So it's a sport of timing. And if you miss 2 or 3 days and you gain 1/4 of a pound, your timing is off and it takes you 2 weeks to recover. So it's a sport that when you commit, you got to be disciplined, you got to commit. When I hit 17, I made the nationals. This was the best high school gymnast all over the country. And they took the top 36 gymnasts from the age of 15 to 18 to Lincoln, Nebraska. I was so excited because I finally was in the top 36, 17 years old. By the way, I grew up in Garland. I don't know if a lot of y'all know where Garland is, but it's Dallas, Texas. I still live in that area today. But at 17, I showed up at the meet, and I was in the top 10 in rankings throughout the country. Well, a week before the competition, I blew my knee out, tore 3 ligaments, and was crushed. So my parents took me to a doctor. He happened to be the Dallas Cowboys doctor, Dr. James Pat Evans, this was back in the early 70s. And he said, Mike, you've got a problem. He said, all 3 ligaments are gone. You're going to have major reconstruction. Back then, major reconstruction meant you had a cast from all the way to the top of your leg, all the way to your toe, and you didn't move it for 8 weeks. And so that was major reconstruction. So making the nationals, disappointment. But he said, you know what? I can shoot your knee up. You might go compete in a couple of events if you want. You might try to do all 6 events. My coach is going, I don't know, Mike. My dad said, I don't know. I said, I want it. I don't know if I can do 1 event or if I can do all 6. And obviously floor exercise with all the tumbling is the most difficult, right? I mean, you're pounding on that floor. You're hitting that leg straight. I mean, and 3 ligaments, there is you have no stability in that knee at all. Shot me up. We went out there. We practiced 2 days before. I didn't do too much. And you know what? God just gave me some strength. And I had claimed a verse called Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. My faith is my faith. I don't push it on anyone else. But for me, it is. He gave me strength. He gave me courage. And I went and competed. Kurt Thomas was in that meet. How many people have heard of Kurt Thomas? Greatest American male gymnast of all time. Kurt Thomas hadn't been beaten 3 years. I won the national championships at age 17 with a blown out knee, and I beat Kurt Thomas. Kurt comes over and says, Mike, I've never seen anybody compete as hard as you did, and he's strong in his faith, and he said, man, you earned every bit of it, but you'll never beat me again. Competition, that competitive edge, we all have some semblance of that competitive edge. He didn't mean that derogatory to me. He meant that as, you're making me a better gymnast by beating me. I'm going to go back into the gym. I'm going to go work harder. And you know what? He was right. I never beat Kurt Thomas in the all-around competition. Beat him on a couple of individual events, but never in the all-around. We were both NCAA champions, USA champions. Kurt and I were on 2 World Cups together, 2 World Championships together, an Olympic team together. And to be able to have that start with the roots that we had. And what's amazing, what I just shared, is Bart Connor, Kurt Thomas, and myself made 5 teams in consecutive order. To make the World Cup in gymnastics, you have to be the top 3 gymnasts in that country that year. So in the World Championships, in the Olympics, usually it's the top 7 or 8. So for 5 years in a row, consecutively, we were the top 3 gymnasts over a 5-year period. That's never happened since, probably will never happen again. I never beat Bart, and I never beat Kurt. I was always 3rd. But you know what? At least I was 3rd, because without trying to beat them, I would have been 6th or 10th or 20th. So as you hear me talk a little bit about competition, it is the root of my life since I was 14 years old. I enjoy it. I compete within myself every single day, whether it would have been a gymnast or in today's world, an entrepreneur. I was fortunate. I got to compete as an individual in a sport, but I also got to compete for the University of Oklahoma. And University of Oklahoma had an okay gymnastics team when I went there in 1975. My father was terminally ill. We lived in the Dallas area. It was the closest university for me to come back and forth to my family. The following year, Bart Connor became on our team. Bart was a 3-time Olympian, 1976 at the age of 18, 1980, 1984. But as he will tell you, with all of his gold medals and everything else, he's more known for being married to Nadia Comaneci, greatest gymnast of all time. Now, until recently, Simone Biles, who is amazing. But these years at OU, I got to be a part of a team, not just an individual, but a team. That team, those members today, we still communicate. We still talk. We still have memories that were bonded almost, 48, 49 years ago. Then the USA team, then the Olympic team. This past weekend in Oklahoma City, inducting Julianne McNamara, who was on the 80 team and the 84 team. Ron Gallimore, Bart Connor, myself, Mitch Gaylord, y'all probably heard these names. We have a bond that will be there forever because of the sport of gymnastics. And many of us went totally different directions and created new bonds. So what gave me an opportunity to become a really good gymnast was my coach, my assistant coach, my sister who encouraged me every single day. And probably the most important was my mom and dad, because they gave me an opportunity to do whatever I wanted to do. And God is my witness, I came home no less than 100 times over a 3-year period from the time I was 13 to 16 and said, Mom and Dad, I want to quit. I've got hand tears on my hands. They keep bleeding all the time. I'm living in pain. My joints hurt. My neck hurts. And I don't want to go back. My coach is too hard on me. They said, yeah, he's hard. And yes, we see your hands bleed and we help you fix them every night in paraffin wax, but it's okay. You don't have to go back. They never once pushed me. The next morning I'd get up, couldn't wait to get back into the gym later that afternoon. I never missed a workout. It was innate. It was as much as I wanted to quit, I couldn't quit because I loved the sport. It embraced my passion, my heart, my desire. Everything I wanted to do as an individual athlete was in that sport. My friends that played baseball, football, all of these sports, basketball in high school, and they were my great friends. Called me ballerina boy. And you can imagine back then, that was very appropriate back in that timeline, calling me ballerina boy. And by the way, it didn't bother me a bit because we were all friends. And the 10-year reunion was pretty special because they came up to me. I'll never forget. And they said, we followed you your whole career. And these were people that I'd grown up with since I was 7 years old. And they said, we knew you could do it. And just knowing people that you knew, you loved, you had no idea they were following you, was probably one of the most special things that's happened to me as an individual. Just knowing that they cared enough to share that. And so gymnastics, an amazing sport. Just like every Olympic sport, what I love about it typically, until recently, is that it was a sport that you did because you loved it, not because of the money. Unfortunately, NILs and everything else are changing the sport of gymnastics and a lot of other Olympic sports. But boy, that Olympic movement is great. Can't wait for the Olympics to pop up here in France. Simone Biles is going to be going for her third Olympic gold in the all-around. It's going to be absolutely amazing. The sport of gymnastics is really one of the most dynamic and the most watched sports on both Winter and Summer Olympics. If you haven't watched much of it, man, the men and women are just unbelievable. And what I love about the sport is you've got to be so disciplined and you've got to work so hard, and it takes so many years to become who you become. You actually become someone really good in society and you push it out. Entrepreneurial. Most of my friends in gymnastics stayed in gymnastics. They coached, they have clubs today. Kurt Thomas Gymnastics, Mark Connor Gymnastics, Mary Lou has a club. All of these folks, many of them that were successful have clubs. A lot of them got their degrees in college and moved on into really strong positions, management and executive positions. There's probably 2 or 3 that I know over the last 40 years that took the path that I took. And the pathway I took is I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So after the Olympics in 1980, which, by the way, where were they? Moscow. Did we go? We did not. So I made the 1980 Olympic team with my teammates. President Carter boycotted. That was his decision. He was the president. We accept what the president says. Do we like it? No, maybe. But Russia invaded Afghanistan, so we did not go to Moscow. We went to the White House where the Congress gave us a congressional gold medal. We call it a participatory gold medal. And basically that's what it was. The year before we won the bronze medal in the World Championships in '79, first gold medal that men had ever won in the history of men's gymnastics. And we were ready to go get the silver or the gold in Moscow. Didn't happen. Everyone in this room has disappointments. We all do. That was a big one for me, but it didn't take long for me to shove it off because I had fallen off the pommel horse so many times in my life that I knew I had to get back up. And so after gymnastics, I said, I'm done. I'm going to get back up and I'm going to go work for an insurance company, which I did. And I worked for this insurance company for 3 years, and I realized in the health insurance side that they were not very good at paying claims for health insurance. Think of a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a United Healthcare, Aetna or Cigna, paying your claims. You don't understand what the EOB says. You got to make a phone call. You got to call customer service. Back in the day, there were no computers for any of this. It was all manual. So it was horrible. And so I worked for a company called Equitable Life out in New York, Fortune 100 company. And I went to them and I said, I'm going to create a third-party administration company at the age of 27. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's going to be involving more tech, more consistency, and more compassion to what you're doing today for your employer clients, their employees, and their members throughout the country. And they're going, you can't do that. You don't have any money. I said, I don't. But I know what you're doing wrong. I know exactly what you're doing wrong, and I know exactly how to fix it. Problem solver. Risk taker, no money. Broke, married, a 1-year-old. How's that going to happen? Had no access to private equity or capital or anything else. I bootstrapped it. Went to them and said, I want to even use your name. I'm going to use Equitable Plan Services. I've already got it incorporated. They said, you can't do that. I said, I know I can't do that. But what if I solve all your problem claims for the next 2 years for free if you'll let me use your name? we cut a deal. That's how I got started at the age of 27, on the back of a Fortune 100 company that had issues, problems. Worked for them, worked for me. 3 years later, I started another company at the age of 29, going on to age 30. These companies were in Oklahoma. 4 years later, I sold both of those companies, moved back to Dallas, started a third company. A year later, started a fourth. The fourth was my largest. The fourth was a insurance company in Texas, competing with Blue Cross Blue Shield, United, Cigna, and Aetna. And at this time, I'm about 33 years old. I started it with scratch. This time I had a little bit of money, had a couple $1 million. But what I didn't realize was I didn't have enough, because I wanted to go after the largest and the biggest and the best. And the biggest challenge I've had with companies that I've been involved with and others that I mentor with is capital. If you don't have the right capital, enough capital at the right time, you're going to have a challenge. Besides having mentors and coaches and everything else, capital is the number one challenge. So the company outgrew my capital. Fortunately, I was able to get some private equity money in. We grew the company to the 5th largest insurance company in Texas. I sold it in 2007 to a company called Concentra, which is a very large company. It's probably about a $5 or $6 billion company today. Private equity is Welsh Carson out of New York. And so I sold it and I got into the big leagues. I took 3-4 years off, bored. 2013 started my 5th company. I've started a 6th, a 7th, and an 8th. My 5th company is Healthcare Highways Today. You can go online. I'm going to leave some cards with some bullet points. But Healthcare Highways is a network that can be utilized by different insurance companies and TPAs to help employers lower their costs and create innovation. The company started with $10 million. We've already returned over $100 million to the original shareholders. And we sold 2 other companies totaling $330 million in the last 10 years that we started from scratch. And we still have Healthcare Highways. And so what I would say is, why that success? A pattern of success. The folks that I have been working with for the last 30 years, many of them, we all still work together. So I have subject matter experts that are brilliant. They're hardworking, they're loyal, they're family, they're faith. They get it. And we've been together for 30 years, many of us. Now we're starting to age out a little bit, so we got to watch out, right? So we're bringing in the young ones and we're doing succession planning. When I say young, some of them are in their 30s and 40s. But what's amazing is it was a team effort, and we had many people on our board of directors and many people out there throughout the country that were even competitors to us or people that wanted to work with us to say, you've got something good. I've had a dozen phone calls from private equity firms in the last month alone going, you're the only organization in the United States doing what you're doing today. You're competing against the largest insurance companies in the world. You're reintroducing competition in local markets. And in those local markets, they now have more insurance companies to pick and choose from. And you're enabling innovation to be at all levels. No one's doing it in the country. So we did it different. We found a problem. Once again, lack of competition was the problem. We wanted to reinvent competition. It took us 5 years to pull everyone together, help them all understand what they could all win in the process. We're having more fun now than I've had in my entire life. I'm 67. I've got the energy to go another 5, 10, 15 years. Who knows? Whatever God has. But what I do like is I'm there in the game every single day with every coworker. And every coworker comes to work trying to solve a problem. So whether it be tech and you've got solutions, biotech, I'm seeing some of this, it's fabulous. Everyone's trying to solve a problem or try to build something better than exists today. Healthcare Highways is trying to build a better insurance company that exists today, which enables a lot of people to come together and piece it together. Some of our clients, Hobby Lobby nationwide, LSU, hospitals throughout the country, Native American tribes. We have Leander ISD, Pflugerville ISD right down the street here. We've got clients everywhere. And why? Because we didn't want to build or do something like everybody else. We wanted to make a difference. And so when you look at that tenacity over in gymnastics, gosh, fell off the pommel horse 3,000 times. I'm sure I've got a few issues on my brain side of it, and fallen short many times as an entrepreneur, especially with regards to capital. But when you look at the things that were common, discipline, tenacity, you have to dream your dream. You've got to have a dream. You got to dream it, and then you've got to dream it bigger. Most of us settle, me in the first few years, settled on just the dream. Wasn't good enough. It had to be bigger and bigger and bigger. Other people start coming in and they want to collaborate with you. They want to help you. They're going, you're getting some success. How can I help you, Michael? How can I help your team? What can we do? It could be private equity. It could be competitors. So what's amazing is that an athlete and an entrepreneur have a lot of the same DNA characteristics. You don't give up. No is not even an answer. You hit a roadblock. You know, we talk about it at our company all the time. Let's turn those headwinds into tailwinds. God, I can't tell you how many times we've been blocked out of a market or blocked out of writing a client because someone's in the way doing something probably not ethical, but there's nothing we can do about it. And so how do you turn that headwind and you're blocked out of the opportunity and create a tailwind to have that opportunity ethically, the right way? So it's amazing that sport and entrepreneurialism are very, very similar. The characteristics are very, very similar. You have pain points in both. Pain points as an entrepreneur is that no one's going to solve the problem. You're going to have to solve the problem, or you're going to have to create the solution, or you've got to bring the team together to build the solution, but it stops with you. You can't ask someone else to do it. You've got to do it. And so as an athlete, you got to do it. No one else is going to do it. Coaches are going to do it. And I would say last but not least, being an entrepreneur for 40 years, this year will be 40 years, has given me a completely different viewpoint of not just my life, but people that I know in life in general. Not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur. It's just not that. But everybody's cut out to make a difference. And so as I spend time with a lot of younger folks, younger than 40, in helping them with their journey, I would say everyone has a fallback position outside of entrepreneur. And people don't like me to say that sometimes, but you have to have a backup plan in life. You just do. I never had a backup plan. I was going to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's what made me a more caring entrepreneur, and working with the people in my organizations and giving them stock, because some of them just weren't meant to be, my executives, as great as they weren't meant to be an entrepreneur. A couple of them left the company, wanted to try it on their own. It didn't work. They came back. They had stock. They are a subject matter expert. So the entrepreneurial side is a very, very, very select group of people. And it requires a very large commitment out of your life. And sometimes some of us just don't have that capacity to make that commitment. It can be social life. In sports, I didn't have a social life. My first 5 years in business, I didn't have a social life other than my wife and my baby. So you understand, right? I mean, it's tough. But if you're willing to give it up, boy, the rewards on the backside are so amazing. So I think I'm about out of time, but I would love to open it up if I have time to answer questions, because I love to collaborate. I don't like to talk. So someone's got to throw up a question. Let's go. What were you giggling about?
When you mentioned about you didn't have social life, yeah, we're experiencing right now. This is the most social activity we would probably have for quite a while.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was awesome. And I really appreciate you doing this. I hope y'all enjoyed that as much as I did. Pretty cool way to open things up, right? Can I get one of my folks to bring the clicker up here? I inadvertently took it to the back. So now we're going to transition to the panel. Actually, I'll go ahead and invite our panelists to go ahead and make your way generally up this way. Thanks, Claire. Just real quickly, would y'all switch over the deck? Yeah, thank you. I want to introduce these three guys. I've gotten to know them a bit, all right, through their participation in TNVC in previous years. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a unique way that I think you guys are going to appreciate. Put them on the spot a little bit. Josh Mecca from M&S Biotics here in the middle. He won and participated in TNVC 2018. Has some really cool milestones to tell us about since those, pushing 6 years now. Tyler Melton, Corvius Medical, won TNVC last year, top first place spot. He's had a heck of a year. And then Brighton Praslikla with Fluxworks, he won TNVC 2022. And Rice, that's right. I could read an introduction, but you guys think it'd be cool to hear them do an elevator pitch? Like you guys are going to have to do tomorrow? All right, I think we ought to put them on the spot and have them do an elevator pitch. Who wants to go first?
We're volunteering here.
Okay. Hey everyone, my name is Tyler Melton. As he was saying, essentially, most people here know that heart failure is a massive problem in America and the world. One thing we're starting to learn is that it's a multifactorial disease primarily driven by pressure changes in the body. Corvius Medical goes after those pressure changes. Essentially, we've identified a nerve that's responsible for that issue, and our device goes in, removes it in under an hour, and we've seen literature show at least 1 year of benefit for these patients, which is severe considering they die within 5 after diagnosis. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Mecca. I'm the CEO of M&S Biotics. If there's any Aggie investors, I apologize. Please come meet me because I met one I didn't even realize was an active investor as they invested through seed round capital, so that's my excuse. So M&S Biotics, we are an IoT device for the operating room. We're basically a smart table. So right now inside the OR, they have to manually count all surgical items. It takes a lot of time. They leave things behind and patients have to go back and get it. We fully automate that entire counting process from beginning to end, but more importantly, we track instrument utilization in real time so that we can better optimize surgical sets. And we've really been off to the races with multiple pilots this year, just closed down a round of funding and had a really exciting article get published by Houston Methodist Hospital this past week. So, yeah.
When you get into your car, the first thing you have to do before you start to drive is you have to put it into gear. Right? Gears are everywhere, from aircraft, spacecraft, you name it. And whether you're in a harsh environment or you're in an everyday environment, you need a gear that never fails. My name is Brighton Praslikla. I'm the founder and CEO of Fluxworks, and we're putting a new spin on gearbox technology. We make contactless, lubrication-free, self-healing magnetic gearboxes. It's a technology that got started for space. We were initially invented for a NASA application to help them travel to the dark side of the moon. Can't really call an Uber there, so they needed a pretty reliable gearbox. But it turns out that there's no need for it to be expensive. And so our company's grown over the years. This is actually my last week in College Station. We're moving to Houston to our 12,000 square foot manufacturing facilities. And we've been able to do it with an amazing team and have a lot of fun along the way. And also, all of my roommates were on the competition gymnastics team. So I used to go out and work out with them and try and do the rings. That was really difficult.
Good job, guys. We don't have to vote on them like we're going to get voted on you tomorrow, but excellent job. I don't think you even got the opportunity. None of you got the opportunity to do an elevator pitch when you competed because you ended up in the finals, huh? So really put them on the spot. All right, before we dive in and start asking some questions, I'd like to make sure that you guys get a chance to get your questions in. We're going to try to do this through the app. We had a few technical difficulties, so we're just going to give it a shot. If we need to, we'll fall back on low tech and use mics to ask questions. But do me a favor and let's try the app first. If you would open up your Excel event app, and for those of you online that are viewing it through the website, that's the virtual event hub, works the same. You're going to click agenda, then click the session keynote and panel discussion, and there'll be a little activity tab in the top right, and you'll have Q&A. And those of you here present using the app, you can type a question. Those of you online using the web version, you can also type a question, but you can vote questions up and down too. So I will be watching those as they come in, and we'll try to get as many questions asked as possible. I've got a few beginning ones to start with, and then we'll get into some audience questions as well. So I'd like to start off with just kind of a little bit of background, how you got here. Maybe you can talk about what earlier experiences, perhaps beyond the company you're currently running, led up to this success. Brighton, you want to start us out?
Yeah, I'll start. Family, no serial entrepreneurs, no super rich uncles, but my mom was an amazing influence. When my father lost his job in 2009, mom, to get some extra income, just started making floral arrangements and then selling those floral arrangements for cash. And then eventually someone said, "Can you do my wedding?" And now she's the top 10 florists in DFW. It just showed me that there's no mystic voodoo science behind starting your own business. There's definitely better and best ways, but with just hard work and grit and talent, you can start it, right? And so proud of my mom. She's amazing. When I went to school, I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur. I studied engineering, got a PhD in engineering. I really was not planning to be an entrepreneur at any point in that. But my talents seem to naturally lend themselves well towards leadership roles. And for someone that got a PhD, I oddly am repulsed by doing technical work. I actually am glad that I never have to do anything technical again in my role as CEO. That's kind of the unusual case. And one day in 2021, I got a call from a company that we were doing research for. And he said, "Do you do consulting?" I said, "I do now." He said, "What's your rate?" I said, $300 an hour. And he said, "Okay." And I went, crap. And that just started it all. I started Fluxworks then, and I started to ask questions. Why did he call me? Why didn't he call my professor? Why didn't he call my PI? What value did he see in me as opposed to others? And that's kind of where it started.
So if you know me, you know my story. What kind of turned me on to this problem is I actually had a kidney transplant, now going back 10 years ago. And I come from a very hard science, and my background's bioengineering. So I was on the pathway to medical school. My brother is actually a urologist right now. I was going to start the year after him, had my MCATs, but kind of going through that experience of the kidney transplant really put an emphasis on these problems inside the operating room. Kind of came out the other end of that procedure, had a new lease on life, was like, hey, maybe I should address it now versus, years later. Decided to dismay my parents to put off med school and, kind of pursue this, end up winning a business plan competition that put a lot of wind in the sails to get things going. And from there, 10 years ago, I was like, the MCAT scores are good for 3 years. I could always go back if it doesn't work out, and never went back. So I've been doing, M&S Biotics, ever since. Took it from an idea with zero business background, didn't know what an angel investor was. I was from Scranton, PA, so it's not the tech hub we like to think it is.
Isn't the office?
It is the office. That is all the tech we have is the office. and Joe Biden, but I don't know if I say that in Texas. But really took it from an idea all the way to commercialization, now early adopters, and it's been a whirlwind of a ride, and it's not easy. It requires sacrifice you didn't know you were going to have to give. I always like to say I went 5 years, no salary. I made $300 every 2 weeks. Didn't get my first paycheck till I was 29 from the company. But just, had a girlfriend that paid the bills and now a wife. So I think that's important. Didn't have a rich uncle or rich parents or anything, but I always like to say, you really need to be willing to make sacrifices you didn't realize you're going to have to, including, maybe raising a family or things of that nature. So yeah, that's my story.
Love it, Josh. Tyler?
Yeah, like my peers here, I didn't expect, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have no idea I'd be in this position. I was an undergrad engineer as well, and essentially went straight out of that into consulting. Just took the best job I could get. It was 2013, and essentially things weren't going well. And I was working at Accenture in pharma tech. It was a great experience, but I was bored. And over time, all my colleagues that were still in the technical and the sciences and things like that, I was a little envious. And so I decided to go back in my MBA with the idea to go work at a Stryker, a Medtronic, on more of a managerial side of things. And during that time, I started working. I actually was fortunate to get a job at Johnson & Johnson Center for Device Innovation, which at the time was pretty much an entrepreneurial hub from J&J in Houston. And that really showed me essentially the in and outs of the process of what was on the other side, technically, not the startup side, but the other, but doing diligence on these companies, seeing some of their passions, some of their ideas really sparked an interest on my side of things. And essentially that's where we came into fruition. After that, I joined the TMC Biodesign program, for those familiar, and essentially let me take a shot in entrepreneurship without pretty much going all in. Most of my MBA colleagues were making a lot more money than I was coming out, but it was worth that shot on goal, at least for a year, to look for something really important. And cardiovascular disease has been my problem in my family for a very long time. My grandpa died at 45 of a heart attack, so I never met the man. And essentially, so it's always been top of mind. And so during the program, when I saw this unmet need in heart failure and a potential way to treat it with essentially almost a silver bullet, it was too good to be true. It was very serendipitous of timing and of the opportunity itself. And I really think that a lot of it does involve around, the opportunities really do evolve around either time and place, or just really looking into that depth of things. And so after spending 5 years in a big consulting firm, which great career, great vacation, whatnot, I enjoyed my last 4 years, even though I'm 10 times more stressed out most of the time doing this, because I just feel like I wake up every day as passionate and very happy. Like we did an animal study today that I wasn't there for, and it went really well. So I'm still feeling that adrenaline, that beaming from that. And I never got that in my other side of the career. So essentially it was a lot of opportunities that fell into my lap that I try to take advantage of as I saw them come.
Awesome, Tyler. One of the things I think would be helpful for the group is to understand kind of what transpired since TNVC. All right. Josh, I know it's going to be a little harder for you to remember those first few weeks after TNVC, but I will lead off with you because I know you've got a lot that's happened since TNVC. Just give us a couple of minutes, and then I'll go on to the others as well.
Sure. So, just as we were participating in TNVC, we actually joined the Center for Device Innovation at Johnson & Johnson. So it was kind of all culminating all in one shot. And for TNVC, is like that was the first blast of energy we got. We won this prize. We got a lot of recognition for it. But more importantly, I was fundraising at the time. And, even though an investor, commits to your round or says, I'm interested or I'm in, until that money clears the bank, it's not in. So winning the competition almost a week or two later, all those people who've yet to send a check, everyone closed down. I was able to raise a round and close it out in like a couple weeks after. And all that was due in large part to TNVC, and everyone, it's like that secondary validation, everyone liked and, saw what we were doing, but they kind of put an exclamation point on it, really just expedited that whole fundraising process. And I think within a few weeks after, we raised like almost $500,000. So, and, that was when I had a small proof of concept. I showed it was very, rudimentary. And now we have, commercial, product in hospitals. So such a short period of time, anyone in the med tech space knows how hard it is to get, med device into a hospital. And, TNVC helped us do that. So.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for compressing that
that down in a short period of time. You've had some
Yeah.
huge milestones. One of the things that you'll get to know as going through this process, we love to brag on you guys, all right? So I'll tell you, we've had plenty to brag on with Josh's company over the last few years, and also seen quite a bit happening with Corvius as well just in the last year. So Tyler, give us an update.
Sure. So when I did the competition, I had just got back like a week before for my honeymoon. So I was kind of already riding pretty high on things. And so, of course, walking away with a win was fantastic. And we've been really utilizing that energy and momentum since. We performed a couple simulated cadaver studies. So essentially, there's a way you can perfuse a recently deceased person and essentially replicate that procedure. So we've had a couple successful simulations doing that, really showing that the time and the ease of our procedure. We've also generated data showing some of our advantages around our denervation. The biggest area, we always call it the silver bullet, is confirmation, knowing that you've destroyed that nerve. And we've seen data, actually the data I'm just referring to, emphasize that today. And so we've been really able to drive that, and that's really gotten conversations with strategics, the boss of the Medtronics, as well as some of the venture capital firms as that data progresses. We were also fortunate to do another competition about 6 months after TNVC called TCT Shark Tank, which is the largest cardiovascular pitch competition, I believe, in the world. It's a $200,000 prize. And essentially, we were very surprised we got in, and we did quite well. We did not win. It was one of those ones where we thought we were going to. We didn't. I'll always remember that. But no matter what, though, it was one of those where we put it in front of the experts in the field. The director of heart failure research from the Cardiovascular Research Foundation was the lead. And essentially, we were picked apart, the Shark Tank, right? They're picking you apart. And we walked away relatively unscathed and supported by these individuals. So it was a really monumental moment for us, first to show ourselves to the cardiovascular world, but also get buy-in from the subject matter experts in the field.
Congrats on that study.
Thank you.
Brighton, how about you? What's happened in the last couple of years?
I got married
Nice.
after Texas A&M New Ventures. Texas A&M New Ventures was the very first kind of big showcase for us. I was still in grad school. I only had one teammate, really. We were just still trying to figure out what we wanted to do. At that time, when we presented at the competition, we were in negotiations with Amazon Prime Air as they were coming into town for our technology. And the Amazon reputation precedes itself in that they were very mean. And so we, later that summer, we got notification that the Army would pay us $2 million to do the same thing Amazon's asking us to do, but we get to keep all the IP. So we told Amazon, never mind, we're going to do this instead. And it's really taken off since then. The Army keeps renewing. We've been able to do, that began as what's called a Direct to Phase 2, a Small Business Innovation Research Award, SBIR. And we've been able to proceed to Phase 3 funding in addition to Phase 2 sequential funding. And we have 2 other Direct to Phase 2 SBIRs. So that's over $10 million coming in the next 24 months of non-dilutive funding. And we get to keep all the IP. So it was just really rapid kind of happenings. It all happened in a very short window. I got notified that we got the award while I was in class. And it said I had 11 days to sign before the change of the fiscal year. And I still hadn't started my dissertation. Someone asked, am I going to drop out of grad school? And I said, no way. So I wrote my dissertation in a week. That was painful. That was extremely painful. And then, just finished school. One important thing that I just kind of want to share too is like growing pains is, we came out of TNVC, we hired our first people for these first contracts. We won Rice, we hired more people. But one thing to really emphasize here is like, I came from an academic mindset and an academic background. And while like some of the things that I've learned are helpful, one thing that I want to say that sounds shocking, but maybe like is just an important thing to keep in mind is we've fired our original staff entirely. There is no one that remains from our original staff because a lot of our first hires are not of the right mindset. And that's, I guess, one of the things I want to put out there as like a challenge to ask yourself too, is like, if you like the academic mindset and academic path, that's an excellent path to go down. but the startup and the industry path and the type of leadership and execution that it takes in that path, even just the incentives, like, and the definition of success, it's just very different. And so Flexworks has grown a lot, changed a lot. I'm really amazed by the staff that we've been able to pull in. But those are some of the fun, crazy things that have been happening along the way.
Well, you just made the next question really hard because we have 2 or 3 questions, talking about team. So I'm going to come to you last since your first step was fire everyone. So we've got a few different questions on team. Obviously, would love to hear a little bit about what maybe your first hires were once you got the money to hire some folks, especially in leadership positions. But also if you talk about the different types of people that you might have hired early on that complemented your own skill set. So Tyler, start us off.
So we're still pretty small. It's myself, my co-founder. We have 1 full-time engineer, and then we have fractional folks here that we work with consultants. That first engineer we had, we were actually introduced to from Dr. Billy Cohn. For those who know him, he's a very successful cardiothoracic surgeon, inventor extraordinaire kind of guy. He's the one that was running Johnson & Johnson's Server Device Innovation. That's how we got to know him well. And essentially, his recommendation went a very long way for us for hiring. But first thing we did was we consulted for about a year with this individual. And we saw from him that drive to where essentially, say a deadline's coming up and we had a setback, well, he'd stay up for 4 days and get it done kind of thing. And that's what you really need to drive, especially on that early team, because there's so many hats, there's so much that can get dropped without that extra rigor and just pursuit of trying to get things ready for the company itself, that he ended up being a fantastic hire that we've now had for about 2 years, and drives all of our design, all of our engineering himself. It's one of those ones too where without him, I don't believe we could have easily gotten this far whatsoever. And it's something I always want to make sure he gets the credit, because I think the CEO gets all the credit when you're with a technology. But I'm an engineer, but I'm a bad engineer. I went to the dark side, got my MBA. So like essentially, I couldn't do it without him, and I really want to, I believe in positive reinforcement, and essentially he's got that drive, but also I want to make sure he understands that he's so valuable to the company. So if you're your first hire, you need to find someone that has that push, that pursuit, where if they finish the one task, they're not just going to go to bed. They're going to put the phone down. They might call you like, what's next kind of thing, because that's invaluable for that, especially that early stage.
Yeah, for me is, obviously I started a company when I was wicked young. So I knew I had to find somebody who had, that gray hair and that experience of running companies, managing people, because I wasn't sure I had that skill set myself. Some might argue I still don't. So I was able to find Martin Scruggs. He's not here today, but he's been invaluable from sourcing the right people and making those decisions. A little bit about him is he's, used to be Air Force Special Ops and then CIA and counterintelligence. So I know he's going to vet these people more than they realize it. And he just does a wonderful job of bringing on high caliber talent and being able to source the right people. And then they meet with me and they just see this like juxtaposition of like young millennial and then older veteran who's run many different businesses. And it's kind of helped like the yin and yang approach to a lot of stuff. And he was the most critical hire because it's just been a force multiplier. Now we're growing. We have fractional roles, full-time roles. When I did go into the Center for Device Innovation, we had access to all the J&J engineers that were there. So it just wasn't, me and my team. There's 20 engineers all ready to help with anything that you needed, and also being able to tap into the expertise of Johnson & Johnson as a whole. So getting on calls with their teams in Europe to kind of talk about how we are approaching stuff. So I've been very fortunate of being in the right ecosystem at the right time and making that early hire with Martin. That's kind of, paved the way since. So.
Brighton, I know, all joking aside, sure you let your original team go, but I happen to know you've built a pretty big team around you now, both employees and advisors. Tell us a little bit about how you built that.
Culture. I only have 6 bullet points on my job description, and one of them relates to the definition and implementation of culture. I really strongly believe in mentorship and advisors, like y'all said. Like it's like getting that experience in, and be prudent when picking your advisors. Definitely, like trust your gut on what's good advice, what isn't good advice. Sometimes you just get a lot of advice, and just your advisors should recognize that not all advice works for all businesses. I mean, if they're good advisors and good mentors. And so, and a lot of them coached me along the way. One of them actually bought me the book Fire Someone Today and shipped it to my house. One of them bought me the book Hard Things About Hard Things, and that's a book that talks about, it's really common as a company grows that just people split, people get different interests, and that's really common and acceptable. So we built a pretty sweet team. I'm proud to say that like probably our first big hire was right after we got the big direct phase 2. One of my old consulting contacts when I was first starting the business as a consultant reached out. It was actually at the NOV Research Center down the street in Navasota. Turns out, fun fact, they were making magnetic gears. And we were able to take them from NOV. They were really getting frustrated with how slow the culture had become. And they were really passionate about coming into a company where there'd be a lot of ownership, a lot of fast-paced innovation, and non-tolerance for being below the definition of the core values, right? These are our core values, and if you aren't those 3, then you're not Fluxworks, right? And we've been able to attract a lot of pretty amazing talent that way. People are willing to take really huge pay cuts to come and be a part of this because it's fun. We're sending gears to space next year. We won a contract with the ISS, and we get to send a few gears to space on a Falcon 9. And I mean, it's just fun to see people get excited about magnetic gears. And so that's just one of the things that I want to encourage, that it's like not a bad thing to do. I mean, it's obviously not, Elon Musk people, you don't show up one day and say, hey, you missed the mark, you're gone. I mean, this is after months of conversation. This is after, trying to work with the people, right? But that's just kind of an important aspect for me, and a big subscriber to mentors and advisors that challenge you.
How cool is that? Just want to share with the audience, we did put a link in the chat, which you can see in the app, that you can upvote questions up and down. Now, I know it's not working directly in the app, but you can go to that link and upvote. I do see a bunch of questions coming in, one of which is a pretty cool one, especially considering I work for commercialization office. Tell us about your IP strategy, intellectual property strategy. What's worked for you guys? Any lessons learned? Josh, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it like 10,000 foot view. Is what I found is there's kind of 2 approaches to IP, kind of like land and expand, and then command and conquer. So you could kind of go after, very narrow claims, very narrow approach, get the IP across the finish line, and then try and expand from there. Or the other side, the approach we did, whether it's good or bad, it's up to the patent attorney, is kind of go for a lot of claims and, force the examiner to, force you to try and narrow them down. You get to argue from a better position. So you cover more, and, you always want to be more vague, more general. So that way you could kind of dip into different applications. So that's been my approach, because we recognize, the technology we've used. We've been approached by, NASA. We've been approached by oil and gas. We want to keep that open-ended, using, one very robust patent versus maybe, 2 or 3, somewhat narrow ones. So that's kind of been my approach to IP. That's a approach that's worked with me and our IP attorney, and mentors and advisors and investors kind of applauded that, but that's the way I've done it. So
lots of small patents and put them in lots of small companies has been what's been working okay for us. There are many Flux children in the Flux family, and they all have Fluxy patents that can be grouped together well to ease M&A for certain product lines. That's what's worked well for us. And then also people respond really positively to slides that have like a few big numbers on it. So when you say like 37 patents, it sounds cooler than 1 patent. That's just been our experience.
That's pretty fair. Yeah. So we went the opposite route. We're a fast follower to one other company, and so the field's pretty open in our area, or it was. Since we went through a biodesign program, we sat there for months looking for an idea, vetting the idea. So part of it was looking at the IP around certain either devices or ways to treat heart failure. And so when we found what we're working on now, it was fairly open besides the incumbent. And so essentially we were fortunate enough to be, since we were through that program, we worked with one of the bigger firms, and we used that to really block out ideally the method as well as the device claims. And we've been expanding on it since. We tried to create as broad of one as possible, and then over time, as we got the data, really solidify that. One thing that worked well, once we did know this is the route we wanted to go, we filed a non-provisional track 1 application, and we had that patent in hand within 9 months of active U.S. patent. And so, kind of really decreased that multi-year process and allowed us the comfortability that we now have it in hand, because an active patent, no matter what, sounds better than a pending patent. But I agree, we only have like 5 or 6 in process, and 37 would definitely get more more looks on goal. But I would definitely start there. Make sure you look at that space. I've had a few friends approach me with ideas, and then the moment I looked at Google Patents, that was their idea, and which is fine because they're new to the world as well. But it was something that I think you should get ahead of, because you can't really fix it later if you don't have that opportunity.
I'll just add a quick shameless plug for some of our sponsors, in that getting good outside counsel ranks up there.
Yes.
Is a piece. But I do think we heard some interesting diversity in those strategies there. So it's not one size fits all.
Talk to more than one. I think that's because you sit down and you're like, why am I doing it this way? Why do you recommend it? And some are, well, that's the way I've always done it. So you always want to make sure you kind of, meet more than one. Cooley, Wilson Sonsini and stuff like that. But, as long as you gel with the approach, it is very expensive to do PCTs. So keep that in mind. Me and Tyler are like, let's get this one really good one. Would love to have 37. But
I don't have 37. That's a made up.
okay. I was like, man,
You just put that on your slide?
yeah. You just need the number up there. It doesn't have to correspond. But okay, got it. Like that.
So interesting question we got from an audience member. Do you have a story about an unplanned connection or encounter that had an outsized impact on you or your company?
Yeah. It was, I just finished the A&M, or not A&M, the Texas TMCX competition. And I, made friends with Dr. Billy Cohn. And more importantly, at the time, his name was Dr. Arjun Desai, Dr. JJ Desai, who, if you know him, he's a Goliath in the med tech industry, and really good friends. And he was one of the biggest advocates, best mentors I ever had in my life. And I was like, oh man, I just can't stand fundraising. He's like, oh, well, do you want to come over to J&J Center for Device Innovation? You don't have to fundraise. And I was like, yeah. So that led to moving over to J&J Center for Device Innovation, where we just got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in support and expertise and everything like that. But just that little small conversation with him of like, oh man, fundraising for this is going to be so hard to do it alone. He's like, oh yeah, just come over here to CDI, and that just really kind of set us up for success. So
I guess I have one. There's probably a few, but just top of my head. So this is pre-company, actually. When I first got my MBA, I was looking at the Rice, graduates from the MBA program who worked in the field, biotech, medtech, or whatnot. And I found one individual who's a friend of some of ours named Adrian. I reached out to him because he was currently going through the program, and just pick his brain as we grabbed beers and started chatting. And essentially that really set up my next 4 or 5 years, because he told me about the program. He told me about J&J, TMC innovation, and essentially really laid that out for me and how to make sure that I'm successful to get in, and while I'm in it, to make it really worthwhile. And we're still friends, but that really did almost domino affect my next year during the MBA program. But then, of course, without that, I don't think I would have actually understood how to make sure I was getting that into it, or even known for the application itself. And so while minor, it was a very butterfly effect where I think it really set it in motion to where I am today.
I'm not saying that because I'm at TNVC right now, but yes, I actually met someone at TNVC. I've had many outsized encounters, but I was thinking one that has continuously strung a huge Fluxworks narrative was actually an encounter at TNVC during the speed networking. It was not someone that was scheduled to meet with me. Someone else was scheduled to meet with me, and he was just a tag along. He's a banker. And I just continued to interact with this guy, Amos McDonald. And every time I met him, his first question would always be, how's Chloe? What's new with y'all in y'all's life? And eventually we would talk about business. And Amos, I guess, time and time again, has continued to level up our business. I mean, just the other day, I needed an introduction. He made the introduction for me. And before you know it, I was at Greg Abbott's house, and we were meeting Greg Abbott for incentives to stay in Texas. And that was Amos that made that introduction. And time again, Amos continues to. So I mean, it's like you never know who you'll meet at any of these events at any time. And when I first met him, it really was not a landmark encounter. It was that I kept on meeting him, and we kept on seeing each other's progress and grew that trust and relationship.
Well, thank you for that plug. There.
Yeah.
And Amos is a good dude. I like him too.
Mhm.
So now I feel bad even asking this question, but came from the audience, already got a couple of votes. So do you see a time where your company may need to change its CEO?
Yes. I only like working like 70 hours a week. That's kind of my limit because I love my wife and I love my life. And I don't mind the occasional, oh, it's a deadline week, whatever, right? But I'm talking the like, you're working 80 every week all the time. And there will be a time where Fluxworks should probably have that seasoned CEO that's managed a large company and is making big moves. And I'm not interested anymore. So I will let them take that. And I don't know what I'll do after that. And I'm not too concerned.
I always like to say is, I don't need to be behind the steering wheel for this car to get to where it's got to go. You put me in the trunk. So I always say is, coming from not a business background is having the humility to play within myself. Hey, Josh, your goal as a founder is take the idea to market, get some traction and hire that stellar rock star CEO that's done this thing before. So I always say the minute I can afford them, I don't mind, pushing a broom across the floor if that's what it takes, just to make sure, I set the company up for success for all my investors. That's paramount. And also I want all these patients to be able to experience the product. But, when the chips are down, I would much prefer Michael Jordan taking that jump shot than myself. Simple as that. So.
I resonate with their answer. Essentially, I've been asked that from some VCs. We're a class 3 device. It's going to take another 6-7 years, $100 million probably to market. And as we're gearing up to those clinical trial phases, that's when I expect there's a good chance that the VC or whatnot will want to make that transition, which makes sense. It is each study is $20 million or whatnot. It's all about execution. And ideally, I've never done that before. Ideally, I will become behind them and learn from those people so I can do it again long term. I think that a lot of us should admit to when we don't know something as well as we should, especially when it's expensive and takes time. And I believe that is a very possible scenario. Of course, we're gearing up to when that doesn't happen for us to continue forward. We're not going to assume that's going to happen. But I do know that likely that large check size eventually that will be a piece of conversation, which is great because then again you can really just have almost a mentor during the process while also making your company successful.
So a question that I really like to ask every year, because I know it's something that many of those in the audience are struggling with. I know personally it doesn't ever end. Tell us a little bit about how you balance fundraising with actually running the business, right? How do you balance those two things that sometimes oppose each other?
Yeah. I mean, I started this in 2014, and I'll never forget one of my first events I ever did was Mid-Atlantic Diamond Ventures. So I'm from the East Coast. If you guys don't know, my original offices were in New York City, even though I'm from Pennsylvania. So I did this, competition / event. And I'll never forget what one of the investors said to me. He's like, get used to it. 95% of your time is fundraising. And that seemed ridiculous at the time. 95%. That's all you do. These early stages, there was never such thing as a pre-seed round when I started, but your pre-seed round, your seed round, your Series A, it really doesn't stop unless you're raising a ton of grant money. Congrats. I'm jealous. But it really doesn't stop. It's nonstop, 24/7. You're always fundraising. Even when you think you're not fundraising, you're fundraising for the round you're going to start next year. So it sucks. Simple as that.
For us, I thought a really important milestone for Fluxworks was when I went on my honeymoon, not only because it was awesome to get married, I highly recommend it, I love it, but because I was gone. I took a long honeymoon. It was 3 weeks. Caleb Holt makes fun of me. It was a 3-week honeymoon. I didn't check my email or my text or my Teams message, and when I came back, Fluxworks was fine. And so that's great. I've done now part of my job. That's good, right? Fluxworks shouldn't need me to run. Fluxworks needs me to grow because my role is more future oriented. So I spend most of my time, fundraising, but also I'd call that strategic partnerships, but also I'd call that kind of thinking about where's the business going. And then occasionally I have to get in because maybe I am for this matter, a subject matter expert, or maybe I am needing to solve this cultural thing that it's actually necessary for me to get in the weeds on. So I would recommend, like, as quickly as possible, try and get out of the way of the business by empowering your staff. So that way you can spend most of your time fundraising and working on the business. That's what the CEO needs. Or if you're the founder, but you're a highly technical person, it's an amazing blessing to bring in a CEO that you've attracted now, and you get to step into that CTO role, and you don't have to fundraise anymore if you're sick of it, right? Like, humbly let someone else take that wheel, because you're still going to be a part of it. That's for us, so that big milestone is like, dude, FluxWorks doesn't need me to exist anymore.
It's funny. I resonate a lot with that, actually, what you're saying. I joked, I've had a couple younger, like, undergraduates reach out about advice and things like that, and they're technical, and I was like, be the CTO, don't be the CEO. But essentially, it's always a trade-off, right? The more money you have, the more you can hire, the more you can do, but also you need to get the money to do so, and it's always a chicken and egg thing. For us in a field that's novel, that essentially doesn't have a lot of, evidence, but it's not something that everyone knows about. Especially as a class 3, it has made investors very specific, because most folks don't want to chase an 8-year, even though that the returns are higher for class 3 devices than the others. It's a long process. And so it's been an interesting challenge to see what we have in the account with our strategy, but adjust that over time as we get more checks in, or as they don't come to fruition as we hoped. And the real idea is you just need to make sure you're progressing the things you have to, whether that's technical, whether that's IP. Certain things can be deprioritized. That would be nice to have. Like, we've had a couple of FDA pre-subs, but we stopped doing so to focus elsewhere. We already have enough of an answer. We can get a better answer, but that hasn't been top of mind. It's been fundraising and tech development, because those two are the key to our success right now. And so I think it's a very, you get pushed and pulled. We're small. So I went on my honeymoon and I didn't work, but I read my emails, because I didn't expect anything to get done unless, on the business side of things at least, because that's my job, because we're small. I wish if we had a larger team I could rely on like that, but at the time we didn't. And so no matter what, I think there's always a trade-off between making sure that you are fundraising, but at the same time making sure you're getting enough done to where, if you're trying to fundraise and you miss a whole key milestone or a key thing in the back end, then you're not going to get the money anyway.
Please do keep the questions coming, folks. We have time for a few more. I would like to ask something a little bit selfishly, knowing who's in the audience and attends TNVC and supports TNVC, frankly. The term entrepreneurial support organization, all right, incubator, accelerator, other mentor-driven programs. What have you utilized along the way? What's helped and what's had some influence on your trajectory as a company?
I can start that one off. We've gone through a lot of them, to be honest. I think that, and I've been asked why, and I think there's always gaps that you don't know. And so there have been times where we've done an accelerator program to where I thought we were a little too far along for what they're teaching, but no matter what, it just takes that one gap they see or that recommendation. And so I definitely would recommend that, but you also have to utilize them for what they are. We went through Y Combinator 2 years ago, and while it was great, it also is not designed for med device innovation. And so when you're going through these accelerators, you need to take the resources from each one you can and make sure to utilize that to the best of your ability, but do not just essentially just assume everything they're doing or telling you is exactly right. You know your business, they don't really. And so I think these groups are fantastic for support, but you need to pull the support on each area you need, not just rely fully on them. So there's other programs like MedTech Innovative, there's TMC, TNVC itself is a network now. And I think that the more you have in their network, the more opportunities you have, the more entrepreneurs you meet like yourselves, but just take advantage of them, at least in some capacity, just not fully. Don't completely dive in. When you're in them, of course, dive in. But over time, make sure you're utilizing what their expertise align with your company on.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to go through TMCX, and I kind of got lucky to go through the digital health cohort. So there's companies that have raised Series B money, 20, 30 million, and some companies like me that, raised almost nothing. And just being able to be in a room and just sponge off all these people have experience was like the best benefit for me. I came down to Houston in 2017, didn't really know anything, and just being able to be around that ecosystem, that's how I learned the most. Not so much the classroom work, it was the stuff after hours, going to every event, meeting people, finding mentors, mentors for life. It was great. Coming, the A&M competition just, pretty much spread me, far and wide. And now we're, obviously TMC, we're a capital factory company as well, a portfolio company. I feel like I'm like a member of every accelerator, incubator there is, Texas and otherwise. But, I think Tyler hit the nail on the head is you have to go in with a set of expectations and, try to get the most out of it, because you just go and think people are going to lead you around by the nose. They're not. And, time and time again, you see that, and people have bad experiences. They speak poorly about it. And you're like, oh, that wasn't that way for me. And you find out why is they thought everyone else was going to do the work for them. So, I think listen more to what Tyler said. Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of various programs out there, and we didn't do very many of them, but we went to their events. They're great. Events like this are great. Events that are hosted by other incubator and accelerator organizations are great. It brings a lot of people into the room, and like you said, you're gonna get little nuggets of wisdom. It's like, even if it seems like your org is more mature, sometimes you get a little nugget that you're like, I've never thought of that. I can't believe I've never heard that. So I think that it was just really helpful. This word is like overused, but just like fully immersing yourself in like the innovation ecosystem at the very start. And immersing can be whatever extent you're interested in. Like for us, we didn't sign up for very many of these organizations, but like we went to a lot of the events and we got to know everybody, who were the key players and how do the knobs turn and stuff like that. That was really helpful for us. But whatever you do, I highly advise against trying to invent the wheel for the first time yourself. I mean, these organizations exist and have models that have demonstrated success for certain companies. And so ask questions and be curious. And why did it work well for that company that was super successful? And in what ways are they similar to me? And what ways are they not similar to me? And what can I learn from that? That's, my recommendation. There's just a lot out there. You can get very accelerated if you want to.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
There's also utility to going through a program that's not tailored to either your area. So we went through one, and we always use the word congestive heart failure. To me, congestive is a word I know very well. I didn't really think it was a medical terminology. I mean, it is, but it's used in other parts of the world. But essentially, because they weren't healthcare specific, they helped me tailor my message to non-healthcare people. They were confused about certain things where I think a healthcare person wouldn't have been, but also you're pitching to people that aren't always in healthcare or in your field. And so I think that is also an asset. Of course, take into account that you have to change that wording based on who you're talking to, but that there really could be some utility for that, because they're almost looking at it with fresh lay person eyes. And then that's essentially the 90% of the people you're going to run into. And I think it's going to be very useful as well.
So one of the themes I heard come out of that, I just want to make sure that it gets distilled out, is engaging with those programs. It's not just a one-way flow of information. It's actually getting involved. It means a lot of networking and going to events and developing those relationships. Some of those relationships probably come out are potential advisors to your company, and we got a question about utilizing your advisors. How often do you meet? How do you engage with those folks? What do you ask of them? I'm going to add one to that question. How do you compensate them if you do? All right. What do they get out of that relationship?
Yeah, we have a advisory board. These are members that I've hand selected that have no influence over the company. Whatever they say, they can't actually control anything. But I've hand selected them, and I've only, all of them have signed, NDAs, and I've asked all of them to invest. So that way, you've got a little bit of stake in the game. If you're going to be giving me advice, I'd like there to be some risk on your end as well. And I've formed a group of about 6 people that it's not like I created some matrix where I was like, oh, I've got to have a marketing guy. Oh, I've got to have a whatever guy. It didn't really land that way. It was more like, these are people that just continue to give me really great advice, and I can tell are really invested in the company. And so I'd like to kind of have formalize that relationship. And the way it's landed, it did kind of turn out as like a BD guy and like a finance guy, and that's how it landed. And our rhythm, and we have an actual calendar that's shared, is like we have a data room that they're able to like look into, and every month my assistant ensures that I'm on schedule with this, and I pull from my leadership team, and they populate most of the email that's going to go out to them monthly. And then also they populate most of the slides that we're going to present in our monthly meeting. So I send them a monthly email, and then a few weeks later, I have a monthly meeting with them. And so that's like our 2 main touch points. And then also for most members, I also have one-on-ones with them each month. So now I have 3 touch points with every member each month. And it's a formalized agenda, and I'm not the one writing the whole agenda. There's certain requests from my team, but then I kind of distill that knowledge or like kind of add my asks that have my take as CEO on them. And I express to them as quickly as possible. These are busy people. So, I mean, try to get it down to bullet point level. And they already have information on our company, right? They can kind of see further context, and they kind of give advice. And sometimes I specifically ask of them for specific introductions or whatever, but sometimes it's just bouncing advice. What did you do? How would you handle this? And then, you know, we, because we're touching base so much, a week later, we say how it went, whatever. And one of the things that I believe is really important about my advisory board members is I'm not fighting them like investors that, you know, have a certain agenda to accomplish. If they say you should try this, the relationship that we've developed is if I go and try it, and then I tell them the next time we touch base, hey, I tried that, it didn't work for XYZ reason. They say, okay, let's try something else then. It's not this argument of, you know, oh, come on, you didn't do it, whatever, right? I mean, it's just, no, they trust me as founder and CEO, and I'm just seeking advice from them. And it's been a great relationship for us, and we continue the rhythm.
I think, you know, early on, I'll say a lot of my advisors are investors. I don't believe in giving equity to advisors. I think it's very challenging. It can get awkward because if you really want to do it the right way, you would, you know, pretty much track their input and their value over, you know, a 6-month period. Like, how many hours did you give me? And even if you want to assign a dollar amount, $300, okay, at the end of the 6 months, what is that really worth? Do you really want to tell someone I'm going to give you like 0.00 something percent equity? You're going to insult them. So don't do that. Don't even, and I've never given even a small amount of equity that I felt the return on it has like really moved the needle for me. So my best advice as an entrepreneur, you know, my original business coach said, don't give advisors equity. I live by it. I just don't think it's the return you think you're going to get. If they're really evangelical about it, they'll invest. And now they have the equity. And now they're incentivized with money into the game to make sure their investment has a return. And it could get super nefarious. You can meet people, hey, I want to introduce you to, I've heard horror stories of, I'm going to introduce you to XYZ people. Okay, that's great. But, you know, I need to get on the board or something like that. Some crazy, you know, there's an ask. Avoid those people at all costs. They'll ruin your company. So I'm a big believer unless they're a board of director, that's when you give them equity, because usually it's an assigned seat from a VC or, you know, major investor or major player. Don't give your advisors equity. And if they want to do it, be upfront about it. You know, here's how I'm going to measure it. Here's what we got to see. And here's the cliff. And if you guys don't meet these KPIs, you know, I'm going to pull that equity back, because as an early stage founder, all you have is equity. And it's the most precious thing you could have early on, more precious than cash. And if you squander it early and you got a messy cap table, you know, just when you're kind of hitting your stride, VCs or whoever, and say, okay, this is a nightmare. They got this guy, Bob, who's got 5%. Who the hell's Bob? Yeah, you're not even going to get a call back from that VC. So short answer, treat your equity like gold. No advisors get it. If they're evangelical about it and want to help you, they'll invest. If they can't invest, then it's great to have a good sounding board. But I think that's paramount to anything of meeting with them regularly or anything. I meet with all my advisors. We talk. We plan, they make introductions and all that stuff on my behalf, but they're incentivized to because they're investors. So I think it's a very straightforward approach. You know, if you're that evangelical about it, you know, throw some money in. So.
And I agree with a lot of that. We have given equity to our investors, our advisors, but also ones that have been around for a very long time. I think one of the issue a lot of startups do is they meet someone that's more seasoned than them, and then they pretty much make them an advisor immediately. All the ones that we have signed on, we keep a very standard agreement, so there's no arguing around. But I understand that some are going to drive more than others, but it's very standard because there's no issue at the end of the day for us. But everyone we've signed on, we've been working with for multiple years. Like Dr. Comey mentioned, he's one of our advisors. He's on both sides of the coin. He has some stake in the company for that reason, but he's also been working with us for many years. And so I know him as a person. I know the cadence we're doing. About a couple of years ago, we found someone who had just exited their company, looking for their next thing, and we brought them on just on a consulting capacity with the idea to make them an advisor or bring them on, and he didn't do anything. And so if we would have signed that person on, of course, we probably would have got rid of him before the vesting schedule kicked in. But essentially, we didn't vet him. It's kind of like hiring a consultant or something, or hiring someone. You work with them over time, or at least know them before you make them an integral part of your company, because essentially they could also now be a detriment if not. I've enjoyed converting them over because now I don't feel bad about picking up the phone every couple weeks. Quick question here or there. Like one of our advisors is Albert Huang, Allotrope Medical. I believe he's been part of this in the past.
Yep.
And Albert's great. Every time I have a more of a, a CEO question, I text him. We get on a call 10 minutes later a lot of the time, and he's a friend, but also an advisor that I can really trust his opinion on. And so I think there's value to it, but also you need to make that relationship over time, make sure that they are who you think they are.
Josh, you mentioned board of directors, and that's kind of a corollary to the same question. Tell us whether you have a board, and real quickly how you engage with them if it's different from the advisors.
Yeah, so we have a board of directors, and I think that's where you get your most bang for your buck, because just one person on our board is ex-GE Healthcare, ran as the CEO all across Asia. She's just a rock star. So that's somebody I could call on a whim and say, hey, here's the problem I have. Here's the way I'm going about it. What do you think? And more importantly, they, everything they say, it's just verification and validation of what you're trying to do. And they end up becoming your biggest cheerleader. And we meet, I send out regular emails and investor updates and stuff, but to meet with your board of directors, usually on a quarterly basis. Hospital sales cycles, shocker, they're long. So just giving them quick updates of, hey, we engaged again, we're about to sign the contract, probably a couple months.
So dial it back to 2018, though.
Oh,
All right,
okay.
2018, I mean, it's important to see where it's going. But if you think about what stage were you at back in 2018 with the board?
We didn't have the board back in 2018. It was just me and at the time Martin and a couple contract employees and stuff. So I actually didn't set up a board early on. I didn't have one. We raised a lot of convertible note investments, so there wasn't that big round that necessitated a board. And every VC we talked to, we said, hey, if we go after that big $3 to $5 million raise and you want us to have a board, of course. And like, yeah, when you get there, it'll be necessitated, but not right now. Now we do. We're much further along. So,
Tyler, how about you?
Our board's still pretty small. It's just the two founders. As Josh was saying, essentially making sure that whoever comes on, we're looking for, eventually want to bring in a third party, non-biased person that we do know as well. We're also expecting, as Josh was saying, that as we do progress, we're going to be pushed to have one from a larger investment perspective. So we want to make sure that we have that opening still, and that currently we can control it just fine with the two of us. But I do think that's something that you need to start thinking about over time, but it will be forced upon you as well in some capacity.
How about you, Brighton? No board?
No board, just
No
me.
board? You got plans for one at some point?
There's so many other things that will happen before that. So not plans yet,
Fair
but I
enough.
know it may come.
Yep. So, one more question. I know it's not the funnest one to answer, but would really appreciate you telling us, some of your biggest hurdles or challenges that you can use as a teaching tool. What have you learned from some of your biggest hurdles and challenges over the last few years?
like I said, I'm lucky to be doing this a long time. I think I've seen it all, probably haven't seen it all, but one of the key things and the challenges, maybe not for me, but I would say this to all the, man, you got to get the founder situation right. So many companies die just because of bad founders. And more importantly, if you have, this is your best friend, Bob, and Bob's got 20% of the company, and Bob says, hey, I got a kid on the way. I got to go get a real job. Bob's gone. You have 20% debt equity. You're dead. Company's dead. Sorry. There's not going to be an investor on the planet that will touch that with a 10-foot pole. So you want to make sure you get the founder situation right. If you have 6 founders, dead. I don't, almost every criteria out there when you're, pitching competitions or meeting with investors, it's like 1 to 3 founders. I meet so many companies where there's 8 or 9. I'm like, how do you even have 9 people are founders? So I think early on, you got to get that core team right. Not everyone has to be a founder. Not everyone has to be an executive in the company, because crap happens. People leave. And if they leave with a big part of your company and you can't get it back, you don't have a company. It's dead. I've seen so many good ideas die on the vine because, they're just, let alone funding, they just can't even work out the drama internally. So that's one of the biggest challenges I see founders have.
And one lesson learned that's probably affects most of us is that most people think they have the best idea in the world, and maybe you do, but not everyone's going to see that. And so it's something that over time we've gotten much better about shrugging it off, or things like, it just takes the right phrasing or the wrong phrasing, to be honest. I mean, even for TNVC, we didn't win our first heat. We went to the second round and then we won that one to proceed forward. But technically, I guess we didn't convince the room that we were the best company to win the overall. Maybe it was something I said or just the group, but you just got to keep moving and shrugging that off because there'll be more. Maybe you can do a little postmortem and look at maybe what you said, what you didn't. But no matter what, no one's going to ever resonate that you can cure cancer and someone's not going to invest in you. And something I think many founders, especially in the earlier stage, need to take to heart because it can be very frustrating, but it's very common and we're pretty much all doing it together. There's always that person you've seen on TV who pitched once and they raised, or family and friends around $20 million or whatever. But for the most part, it's just very common that it's a grind and it's part of it. And that does not mean your idea is bad, does not mean your business model is terrible or anything, but it just means you haven't found the right person all the time.
For me, the lesson that I've learned over the past, I guess, 6 months heavily, that's been so amazingly improving of Fluxworks, is it's okay to tell the people that you trust closely within your company that you're stressed and here's why. Like, you don't have to be superhero CEO. It's been building an unbelievable level of trust both ways, and productivity just seems to be going way up when everybody knows what everybody's expectations are, why people are feeling intense and stressed. I mean, it's just like, you know, for those in the room that are married, it's just like, it's okay to tell your spouse what your needs and wants are. You know, it's like, you need to. If you don't, like, say like, hey, I'm tired, I need to blank, or like, hey, I'm whatever, right? I mean, it's okay to trust your direct reports in your company with that information. It's not saying that I go stand up and give a CEO speech at a town hall and say I'm tired. That's not appropriate. But it's just when the closed doors with your other chief executives, you know, on your team, like, you have to be able to trust your team with that, and you have to be able to share that, or else it's just all going to go on your back, and something's not going to go well down the road when you aren't communicating your expectations well with each other. So that's been something that, like, I've learned the hard way, because when you don't express it, then someone's very surprised when someone's upset, and then it results in a nuclear meltdown type of firing situation, right? And that's never good. You should see it coming. You know, both parties should see it coming. Yeah.
And just a piggyback is, don't ever feel guilty when you take time for yourself, because everyone asks me, what's your work-life balance? I'm like, I don't have one. It's 24/7. But I never try and feel guilty if, I'm just going to take the morning to go hang out with my dog all day or something like that. I don't have meetings. Take the time for yourself. Don't feel bad about it. Whatever you got going on, you're going to have more next week. So I always try and impart that. It's just, don't feel guilty. You want to play video games all day because you finally have a moment to do it. Don't feel bad about it. Just get it, enjoy yourself, or you'll go crazy.
So one more question, and then I'm going to wrap things up. This one came in kind of specific, but I actually think, at least Josh, you can weigh in. Tyler, you probably too. And that's about the impacts of 3D printing, all right? It was asked to you, Brighton. What are the biggest challenges standing up manufacturing or leveraging new manufacturing tools like 3D printing? But I know it's had impacts on your business as well. So Brighton, since it went to you, was directed towards you, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, we use 3D printing a lot for, when scoping projects with early customers, right? A lot of people always want a proof of concept. So you can scope a really great project where you produce a really low cost, low effort, very additively manufacturable, proof of concept to send and demonstrate, just so people can get it in their hands and see what you're going to make them, or maybe for last minute, like, test stand equipment and stuff like that. So 3D printing has been incredibly helpful for us in, winning, new business rapidly and at low cost, getting proof of concepts out there at low cost. But it's just important, the difference between prototyping and manufacturing. For some technologies, you can use 3D printing technology for your actual final product. In our case, we've discovered that there's just really no technology and no printer out there that's appropriate for our technology and for our solutions. And so it's just kind of like a bifurcation of the company and the understanding between what's a prototype and what's a product, and then having to build out that manufacturing as a completely separate thing. And that's what we're moving to, the Houston area for, is to build out that manufacturing. We've really enjoyed having little desktop 3D printers in-house, just so people can visualize things. We also have purchased an industrial 3D printer, and that's been helpful. But there's a time and a place to do it in, and there's a time and a place to outsource it, just depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, we were lucky when we were making some of the original minimal viable products. We were at J&J, and J&J picked up the tab for all the 3D printing. So it was like $20,000-$30,000 of 3D printing. Definitely, you want to make sure your form factor, whatever it is like the commercial one, because it's wicked expensive to blow mold. I think we paid for all the tooling and everything was $40,000 before they ever produced one unit. And I was like, oh my God, I like this. Got the bill. I was like, what is this? So you want to be able to take advantage of it as much as possible, because you can't there's a little bit of room for margin to make changes to that tooling or that, that mold, but not that much. So you want to make sure you're able to do it, as cost effectively as possible before you get to, this is it. This is, the commercial, version, and we're not changing it. It's totally frozen from a design standpoint, but take advantage of it while it's, relatively cheap. So
I love the question because 3D printing is my hobby. And so we've been able to utilize a lot of my own ones. I have a laser cutter as well that we've been able to really use from a lot of those early stage things. But in all honesty, J&J still have, it's not J&J anymore, but CDI still has those. We use those all the time, especially when it comes to like the handles of our catheter. That doesn't, long-term that will be injection molded, but right now you don't need to do that. And so it allowed us to visualize things and really feel them out, whether it's size, ergonomics, or whatnot. And I think it's something you can really utilize. And also, one of my biggest mistakes I've made as CEO was moving to a manufacturer too early. And I think 3D printing can really mitigate some of that. We got value out of what we did, but essentially we were seeing the tab go up. We weren't driving it we wanted to, because we should have kept it in that earlier stage where we're still building, breaking, creating, versus trying to go to the now, direct to one manufacturer. So I think it's something, if you can utilize it, definitely do, because it's cheap. It's becoming very common. It's not like they're very rare anymore, I don't think. And so I think it's a great resource.
So let's wrap things up. All right, we covered a lot of different stuff, but what did we miss? What do you wish, is there anything you wish you would have heard when you were sitting out in the audience, when you were a competitor? Any advice you have for folks?
I think the best advice I got, and has always been, minus a competition. The guy's name is Steve Krein. He's from Startup Health. He said, never pitch anybody your, company or your idea that's not going to be an investor or customer, because you're likely to get advice, or they want to be the smartest person in the room. So it's going to usually be like, nitpicking or devil's advocate. It's not really helpful. I always thought that was valuable, because it's like fixing a slice in golf. I'm sure everybody in this room would tell me to do it a different way. But it's only when I go and I'm working with a golf instructor that I'm paying, or he's investing in me, his time, that it's going to say, hey, let me see the swing. Okay, here's what you're going to do actually. So I thought that has always been a good advice. You want to share your idea with, far and wide. You'll just get a lot of static. You'll get a lot of stuff that contradicts what somebody else said, and you'll just get overwhelmed. So investors and customers, they won't sugarcoat it to you. They'll be the best, best bounce board for any idea you have. They'll be like, no, that's probably not going to work. No offense. Just an anecdote is, I'll never forget my original business mentor. I was telling him how great all these people I met, they were telling me my idea was so awesome. He's like, did anyone cut a check? I was like, no. He's like, not that great. So that has always wound down my expectations of getting advice from people. If they're not going to cut a check, it's not that great. So.
Yeah, I guess thing that nobody asked about is like, why do you do this? And that's a question that you should ask yourself all the time. I think that for some reason, entrepreneurship is seen as some weird pinnacle of success thing, that if you're smart, you'll go work for someone. If you're really smart, you'll go work for yourself. That's so dumb. You should, if you're really smart, you should ask, what do you value in life? Forget company core values. What are your core values? And just do that, right? If your core values lead you to the decision of starting a company, do that. And if your core values say you're very happy with a 50-person company that is tightly held, family owned, you should do that. Like, the world will tell you you're a bad person, because if you have a startup, you should have investors and you should exit in 3.5 years. Like, that's you know what I'm saying? But just what do you want out of this? And if, us up here, we do want our technology to scale and probably get into the hands, because one of our core values is probably impact, or one of our core values is we like to mentor and grow things, right? I mean, whatever that is, but just ask yourself that. And it's okay if your values are different than our values, because if you're doing this and you're working 80-something hours a week and being beholden to mean investors all the time, and it's not even the company that you want anymore, then like, why would you do that? Just kind of stay focused on what matters to you. That would be my advice.
Mine would be more around, I guess, TNVC itself. So for the competitors here, only one can win. So try to have a good time. A lot of people here or come back aren't the winners, or the ones, it's all about the people you're meeting here, the network you're making. And of course, a check's always nice, but I think that a lot of the value for this program, this competition, is all the build up toward that. And I also think that when you're having a good time, people see it on the stage. When you're actually enjoying what you're talking about, you can see the energy, you can see the passion, versus just kind of a slog if you're frustrated or whatnot. And so keep that in mind, because if only one person's going to walk away with the larger check, of course, there's a lot more others than just the biggest one. But at the same time, the value you get in a year or two from now really is driven by that soft aspect of the competition. And I think that you should really keep that in mind.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for the panel. Appreciate y'all sharing your experience with us. So next up, actually, hope you'll join us as well. We're headed up to the rooftop for a quick reception. My staff want me to tell everybody it's easiest to go out and go to the elevators up here, go up to the 11th floor, and there's a ramp that goes onto the private area, the rooftop bar. If you end up at the very top floor, you'll go through the public part of the rooftop bar and you'll have to come back down. So 11th floor, head out this way. Elevators are up towards the front of the lobby. See you guys upstairs. Thanks, guys.